Okay, welcome everybody to SNC Pro Talks, where staff and students from Suffolk New College interview professionals of the world of sport from all over the globe. And today we have the pleasure of introducing and interviewing Ben Pugh, head coach of the international team for the Cayman Islands. Ben, thanks ever so much for joining us, and good morning to you, because I think you're 5-6 hours behind us.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, 5 hours behind, so it's bright and early here, so nice early start, but looking forward to this definitely.
Brilliant. And so just give us an idea of where you are in the world then.
Yeah, so in the Cayman Islands, which is a group of 3 islands. You have Grand Cayman, which is the biggest island, which has about 64,000 people. You've then got Cayman Brac, which has around 2,500 people, and then Little Cayman, which is about 600 people. And we're located just below Cuba. So Cuba is above us, and we're beside Jamaica as well. And it's about an hour's flight to Florida. So it's very difficult to see us on the map because we're very small, but it's a lovely place to be.
Yeah. Can you take us on a little bit of a tour outside your window? What's your view look like?
It's actually a little bit breezy today. I don't know how much you can see, but the water's just here, so it's not the worst view I've ever had. But it's actually not too warm. Well, it's very warm, but it's not too bright at the moment. So wow. It's very lucky.
Right outside there, you have got the Caribbean beaches, at your feet, so to speak.
Yeah.
Wow, what a life! And having known you for most of my life, I think well deserved that you've got yourself out there as well. And we'll talk about that more as we go. So, start us off, Ben. So, what is your role? What do you do, kind of day to day?
Yeah, so I've got a few roles. We're obviously quite a small football association. So I'm head coach of the men's national team. I also head coach of the U23s when Olympic qualifiers come about. We had those a year before last, sorry. And then alongside that, I also I'm director of coaching and also director of coach education as well. So quite a few hats to wear, but day to day, it looks like managing the leagues, the senior leagues, the youth leagues. We train as a national team 2 or 3 times a week. We're a small island, but we're quite lucky that most of our players are island based. So we can train on a Monday and a Wednesday evening, and quite often play games against like a foreign select team, which is a reasonable standard. A lot of good Honduran and Jamaican players on island, lots of expats here. So we play those games regularly, and in terms of coach education, we run quite a lot of courses here. So we've recently just run 3 CONCACAF D licenses back to back. So my day to day is very, very mixed. Sometimes, as I said, it's league stuff. Sometimes it's more coaching stuff. Today is full of CONCACAF meetings. Quite often have FIFA meetings as well, which is great for networking, and the level of people that you speak to is obviously is great. So yeah, it's my role is very, very varied, and I try and squeeze in a little bit of time to enjoy the island as well. But as we know, those who work in football, it's very time consuming, and it's not 9 to 5. So I watch lots of games, I watch lots of training sessions at every age group, and then go in and try and help with clubs as well.
And how long have you been in this role now?
Yeah, so I've been on island about 2.5 years, and I started working at the Football Association about 2 years ago, and then went full time about 1.5 years ago. So I've been the head coach since March, would have been 2018, 2019. But I've been full time in the association shortly after that, looking after having these other roles as well.
And you've had some unbelievable success in that relatively short time as well, haven't you? You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, we did really well. So, due to a few reasons, the Cayman Islands didn't play a game for a few years, and they actually hadn't won a game in 9 years. We played in CONCACAF Nations League qualifiers, where we were drawn in a group with US Virgin Islands, Barbados, and St. Martin. And we actually went on a run and we won 4 out of the 6 games, and we narrowly missed out on qualification by goal difference. But we were lower ranked than every team. We were at the time 206 in the world out of 210, I think it is. So we moved up quite drastically, 11 places. And we beat Barbados as well, who were 75 places above us in the FIFA World Rankings. So we did really well, and it's a good group of players, and we can certainly build on that going forward. As I said to Lee, we're supposed to have some games coming up in March, but with COVID, it looks like there's a chance, unfortunately, they'll be cancelled, or we might even have to withdraw due to the current situation.
And what a shame, because one of those games is against Canada, who have
Yeah.
got a number of players that play at the highest level in Europe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're drawn with Suriname, Canada, Bermuda, and Aruba. So we're supposed to play Suriname and Canada in our first 2 games. But and I'm quite fortunate. I speak to the Canada coach now and again, and he was saying that he's actually got approval for pretty much all of his players to be released for those games. So it would be massively disappointing if we can't play those. But equally, with the current climate, we recognise the challenges that are put in front of us, unfortunately. And as I said, we don't have the budget that Canada have. We don't have the budget that Bermuda have. So it makes it very, very difficult. And the protocols we have here on return with a 14-day quarantine makes it very, very difficult. So we're asking for players to be released from their jobs for 10, 11 days for the games, and then return and quarantine for 14 days. It's very difficult to get an employer to give somebody 25 days off work. So we have meetings actually later today, shortly after this call. So we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I really, obviously, as long as people can be safe in the current climate, I hope that you get those games and those opportunities, because, what an opportunity to play against the likes of Alphonso Davies and, Champions League winners and everything like that. It's that would be amazing. Definitely. So, what's the difference, would you say, between the culture in football in the Caribbean, in the Cayman specifically, to you having worked in the pro environment in the UK?
Yeah, it's very different in terms of the pro environment. We don't have any pro leagues here, so everything is amateur. But to be fair, it is a good amateur league. It would be a reasonable non-league league in England. In terms of the differences, at times it's slightly slower paced and maybe less physical. What you tend to find is in the Caribbean, people you get most contact is a foul, which I don't particularly like. But other than that, technically it's okay. I'd say tactically we have a little bit to do here in terms of how teams play. It's very off the cuff, I would say. So I think if those teams that have structure tend to do very well. And just the general lifestyle, it is a lot more casual out here. It's a lot more relaxed in terms of the lifestyle in general, and in terms of, as I said, in terms of football as well. There's far less discipline in terms of people's routines, in terms of hydration and nutrition and exercise. Slightly different so with the boys that are involved with me in the national team. But just in general, it's a far more relaxed place to be and style of football.
And so you mentioned about the differences there in terms of, I suppose it's those aspects of professionalism, which can be really difficult for somebody who's got a full-time job to abide with. But how did you find that challenge? Because having worked professionally with Ipswich Town Football Club, where those things would have been paramount to success of every player, to moving to the Caymans, where the players don't necessarily have the time, the finances, the structure, the support to look after their diet and things like that. Is that quite difficult for you at times to be able to adjust between what you've been used to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I've certainly become, or has certainly I've adapted to over time. But I think, like you said, it's just the reality of the situation. So Ipswich, even working in the 16s and younger or older players, they're very much driven towards their football. Here, even in the national team, all our players have another job. So, for example, we have some players who work in construction who will be working in 30 degrees heat all day, and then they're expected to come training for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and physically they're exhausted. So the reality is very, very different. We have, all our players have another job, and that's part of the problem with these games coming up. It's we have a couple of players playing overseas who we'll definitely look to use in these games, but that's a big problem we have in terms of their lifestyles is what their work will allow them to do. Family, obviously working with adults, some of these players have children and other responsibilities. So for me, I've certainly had to adapt, and I think as a coach, that's one of the main attributes that you have to have, especially when you work in an environment that's not professional. Even when it is professional, but certainly when it's not professional, because the day-to-day lives of your players is very, very difficult. And I think even in a professional environment, those stresses, those family issues, you have to be. I see myself, and I think we should all see ourselves, those that coach, as a developer of people, not just as a developer of players. I think that personal side of it is extremely important, and recognizing that everyone's extremely different. Some players need an arm around them. Some players you need to be a little bit more firm with them. And I think that, that has been maximized here in terms of the difference of players that have to work with. Some of our players are really young players who maybe their environment isn't particularly healthy in terms of their upbringing, in terms of their family situation. And then we've got others who are struggling to make ends meet, but have a couple of children. And then, like I said, we've got some that work all day in construction. It's the dynamics are very varied. And I think, as I said, being adaptable and having those personal skills, I think, is very, very important.
Yeah, and all of those things you've just mentioned, I suppose that makes the success of what you've had recently with the Cayman's football even more sort of spectacular. You punched well above your weight.
Yeah, we did, and I said there was some really good stuff when I got here, and what I tried to do is just give us a little bit more structure and be real to the situation. Everybody wants to play expansive football and be great on the ball, but realistically, playing against Barbados, who had 8 or 9 professional players, we knew we couldn't do that. So it was about being well organised and getting everybody believing in something, and also giving younger players an opportunity, which I think is very important as well. Sometimes they'll surprise you. Sometimes they just need that little bit of belief and trust in them. So yeah, we did really well, and I think we have a really good core of young players. And we've had a couple go overseas for trials in the US, and we would have more, but again, the current situation is. Let's put that on hold for now, and we have a few players that are a little bit frustrated because they want to get overseas, and as I said, they can't. But it's a good group of people here and a good group of players. So it's been really good.
Yeah, and how well is it supported on the island and in the Caribbean in general, where we're usually associating sports like cricket and athletics?
Yeah, so cricket and athletics are big here, but football's still the kind of the biggest sport, or the best supported sport, and as well across the Caribbean. So I actually think Caribbean football is better than a lot of people think, and it probably doesn't get the credit that it should do. I think there's a lot of good players, as I said, not only here but across the Caribbean that maybe could play at a higher level, whether that be in Europe or South America or in the US. I think the US is a very good option for players here. It's far closer, and I think in some places, I think the climate is very difficult when you've been living in 30-degree heat for 20 years of your life. To then go and play in England, as you all are at the minute, in freezing cold temperatures, I think is very, very difficult. So yeah, it is well supported. We tend to get about 2,500 for our games, which is okay. It's good for here. It's about the maximum our stadium can hold. So. It's been, and I think especially if the game was to be here against Canada, I think again we'd get more people, but the chances of it being here, are very, very difficult. I think if it goes ahead, it will be in a central location, probably in the US, just because of those quarantine rules.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up for some students to ask some questions before we progress. And this one's a difficult one for a lot of people, I think, to summarise, but with how articulate you are and how well you kind of know yourself in your game, I think you'll be good with this. We hear a lot about philosophy when it comes to coaching and football. So what's your philosophy and has it changed?
So I think I have a few very clear values and principles that I have, and I'll go into a couple of those, but I've touched on them already. I think you have to be extremely adaptable to the situation that you're involved in. I started coaching grassroots a long time ago, and I think actually some of your best learning actually happens there, because I think you didn't know how many players you were going to have, you didn't know what equipment you were going to have, you didn't have someone to cut the grass. Now my challenges are very different, but I still have to be very, very adaptable. So I'm big on being adaptable. And I said the biggest thing is those personal skills. I think, as I said, I think whatever role you work in, and I've been quite fortunate that I've spoken. I've got a reasonable relationship with Roberto Martinez. I've been quite lucky to do a couple of like one-to-one calls with him through a friend, and he said the same thing. Even he feels his job is to develop people, and I think when you're working with Belgium, the #1 ranked team in the world, if his philosophy is still the same about, he said it was something that really resonated with me, as he said, when he was working in any role he'd coached the person 6 days a week, and he'd coach the player for maybe 30 minutes, an hour's tactical work. And I thought, if he can do that at that level, and it's still very much about the person, then that's something they have to be better on. So a big philosophy of mine is trying to improve the person and trying to see what they want out of their football, and then doing everything we can to get that. And then when they go away from that, so if somebody is late, if somebody's attitude isn't great, we always refer to what they wanted or what their goals are. So that's a big thing to as I said, is coaching the person, not coaching the player. And then I've got a few others, and Lee, if you want, I can even send some stuff over to you around my coaching philosophy. But I think my main principles are those two: so being adaptable and coaching the person rather than the player. But I'm actually in the process of putting together like a game model, which is all of my stuff, which is technical, tactical, and that psychological corner, which I think is extremely important.
That's brilliant. That's really, really interesting. Thank you. So over to the student group. Guys, start us off. Any questions that you've got thus far? Yeah, Adam, go for it.
I was just wondering, so after college, what did you do? Did you go to university, or did you go straight into a job, or what did you do?
Yeah, so I guess my journey is I took a similar journey to what a lot of you are on. So I did basically a BTEC at West Suffolk College. So I did a sports science BTEC there, and then from that. So I played football in the Berrytown football scheme, and then after that, I started working, coaching football, but at a very grassroots-based level. And from then, I then went to Suffolk College and did a sports science degree. Alongside that, I made some quite good friends there, and from that, I actually started a sports science internship at Ipswich Town. So working with the 9s to 11s, so doing agility, balance, coordination work. And on top of that, I volunteered because I'd done my level 1 and 2 at the time. So I started to do voluntary with the pre-academy, the under 7s and under 8s. And again, I'm a great believer in you have to volunteer and you have to be the hardest worker. So going into my philosophy, I think you have to be the hardest worker in the room. And to get in a position that I am now, I feel that I've worked really hard for it. And I think when I then went on to work at Ipswich part-time and then full-time, I knew I was always going to be up against ex-professionals who had, that level of playing experience that I never had. Like Lisa maybe touched on before, I was a very average footballer. I was okay, but I knew I was never going to play at a top level. But what I hoped is if I work hard enough and if I apply myself enough, that one day hopefully I can be involved at the top level, but through coaching, instead of playing. So I went to university afterwards. as well as volunteering and coaching as much as I could. At one point, I think I was working 3 jobs, as well as volunteering at Ipswich, as well as doing my degree, and kind of, doing what I had to do to get in the position that actually I'd get noticed. And when something full-time came up, I was offered it. So that's kind of what my journey's been like. And then as it's going further on from that, I was then full-time at Ipswich. So my last job, I was leading the youth development phase, so the 13s to 16s. So I oversaw that and was helping out on day release with the 18s. And it was when Mick McCarthy was there and Terry Connor, and they were great people. What people say about their football style is their opinion, but in terms of people, they were outstanding, and they were really keen and happy for coaches to come and watch their sessions. And I learned a lot from them. Like I said, not in terms of football, but in terms of how you treat people. And then further than that, an opportunity came up here, and it wasn't the national team. It was working at a club here, and I thought, I quite fancy a life experience. I don't want to get to a stage where, in my development, I'm still at Ipswich in 10, 20 years. So an opportunity came up, and I took the job, and I was quite fortunate that I could help at the Football Association, and it snowballed. And as I said, now I'm full time and in a position where I'm coaching, obviously, the national team.
Brilliant. That's a really good question. Thanks, Adam. And Ben, being a good friend, I can speak firsthand just how much time, effort, and the volunteering you put in. I mean, you were always and have always been the hardest working person in the room. And, if there was 8 days a week to work, you were doing it, weren't you?
Yeah, no, I think you have to. I genuinely am a great believer that you have to work. As I said, be the hardest worker in the room, especially if you don't have that in coaching. If you don't have that ex-professional background, I think you have to do something to get noticed, or if not, opportunities will kind of be passed by. So my advice would be, if you have any coaching opportunities, or whether it be in a professional or a non-professional environment, utilize them and maximize those experiences, because one, it fills your CV, but two, someone might notice something they like, and very quickly that can turn into a part-time or a full-time role. Yeah.
And I remember us having a conversation once when I wanted to I can't remember what we were going to do, go for a kickabout or a drink or something. And I said, can you come out? And you said, no, I can't. I've got to do I'm doing another shift tonight over in Cambridge with some of the Ipswich stuff.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why are you doing that? You're doing A, B, and C already. And your answer was quite simply, because if I don't in elite football, somebody else will, and I won't get that chance. And you are most definitely testament to working hard and really putting the shift in gets you to where you want to go. So congrats on that, and it's certainly a fantastic story, and hopefully the students can take some confidence from the fact that if they work hard, they might be able to get similar opportunities.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, like I said, my pathway, I was at college doing a similar or the same degree as what you guys are doing. So my advice would certainly, hopefully, I'm proof that if you do work hard enough, and as Lee said, I used to do a development centre on a Monday in Braintree and a development centre on Friday in Cambridge, and but it does pay off working hard and doing those jobs that maybe you don't want to do, but as I said, if you don't, somebody else does, and they'll get the opportunity ahead of you. So always be the hardest worker and maximise any opportunity you get, whether that be volunteering, whether it be, and we all get days where we think, I can't be bothered to go to class or to work or to whatever, but you just have to find a way to do it, because that might be the one day that somebody is watching your session, or that's seen, or looking for somebody, and because you're there and because you're on time, because I think that's another thing, and that's one thing that frustrates me here, going into the casual nature that is here. People are late here all the time, and I hate being late. I think, again, if you're going to be reliable, you have to be there on time. I pride myself on being early as much as possible. So that's another thing I'd be big on. Be on time, and maximise any opportunity that's offered to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Any more questions from the students before we move on? Super. We've had one come up. Did you always want to work in football? And who do you support, or who did you support, and who was your hero when you grew up?
Yeah, so always wanted to work in football. I wanted to be a footballer. I think same as Lee did, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. I think that's the pinnacle is can I play at the highest level. Unfortunately, I was quite realistic, and I knew at 17, 18 I was okay. I was never going to be a player at a high enough level that would I could earn a living off. So I knew I wanted to work in football, as I said, and I thought, what's the best way I can do that? And from there I thought, well, I want to be involved in training sessions, and I did the sports science degree later at uni. But if I'm honest, I only did that because I thought it would help with my coaching. The idea was I wanted to coach, and I thought anything I can do again to supplement that. So having a better idea of the physical corner, I thought, and the social corner would be beneficial. So I did that. I always wanted to coach. Was my second choice after being a player, and Ipswich was my team, but I always like Liverpool as well. My dad is a Liverpool fan, and same as Lee, we'd go up to Anfield now and again, and same as Lee, Robbie Fowler was our hero, is our hero maybe still, but I like Liverpool, and obviously working at Ipswich is where I'm from. Ipswich is my team, so I follow them, watch the game. Unfortunately, we're struggling a little bit at the moment, same as Liverpool, but they're the teams I look out for and follow as much as possible.
No, brilliant, thank you. So you've touched upon some of the essential characteristics like being reliable and hardworking. Are there any other characteristics that you think are essential for working in coaching, and particularly in the pro side of it?
There's quite a few. I think another thing I think is important is honesty, and especially with players. I think we live in a world where people want to always hear the positive stuff and want to be told how good they are. But I think for a player to really improve, especially if we're talking about individual player development, I think you have to be honest with them, and you have to tell them when things are not good enough. And I think going back, if you build that relationship with people, and if you're you're not just a coach, you're a friend, you're a mentor, then you can be very honest with them. So I think honesty is an important thing to have. I think I've seen it a lot where people don't want to give negative feedback when players ask how they're doing. So people literally say, yeah, you're doing well, you're doing okay, rather than saying, okay, well, you need to do this better, and it's how you phrase it, right? So it depends on the player. But as I said, if you build good relationships, you can be very, very honest with people, and further down the line, that will help them. Because we know the reality of football. I think it's not all straightforward. If you look at a graph of player success, it's not an upward line. It has ups and downs all the way. We still call it planning bumps in the road at Ipswich. So you almost want those good players to have bad experiences. And when I talk, so how does a player react when they're a sub? They might be the best player, but they're a sub. How do they react when they're taken off? How do they react when they're not getting lots of success? And I think if you plan that, two, if you're very honest with them and you explain your reasons and you build that good relationship with them, that builds that more rounded person, and they'll be able to deal with failure later in life, and hopefully that will lead them to more success and not have the adverse effect where they've always had very positive stuff. People have told them how good they are. It gets to 17, 18, 19 and now becomes a little bit tough and they can't deal with it. So as I said, those relationship skills and them being very honest is another thing that I'm big on as well. That's another one of my core values. So I think that's important. And I think there's lots of stuff. I think everyone will have, but the basic human principles that you have in any job of how you treat people, I think is very important. I think that and something that something I'm also big on is developing your own, not only weaknesses but your own strengths as well. So I have an individual development plan that I made for myself, and I've given to quite a few coaches here that started a coaches association. So the same thing, trying to develop coaching across the island. So when I leave, a local coach can take over and be more upskilled and have qualifications. But with that individual development plan, and especially during COVID or the lockdown that we had, we're quite fortunate at the moment that we've been COVID free now for about, I think it's been about 9 months. We went into lockdown last year, and because it's a small island, they shut all the borders, and so things are running almost as normal. But what I was conscious to do in that time is to develop my strengths and weaknesses. So I built an individual development plan, and I said, okay, what am I not great at? Or what do I improve? So one thing was communication and was presenting in front of others. So I made sure I put myself out there, and I did loads of podcasts, webinars, talks. Not that I was comfortable with it, I wanted to do it, but I knew that further down the line it would help me. And I think something else which is a part of this job, which I never really had to do before, was press conferences. So at Ipswich, working with the youngsters, I never had to do a press conference. Whereas going into games here, I had to do a lot of media stuff. And I think if I looked at my first and second interviews here, they're miles away from my more recent ones, and that comes with putting myself out of my comfort zone and trying to develop those weaknesses. But I think in terms of our players, if you're gonna get an opportunity somewhere, it's not because you're okay at everything. It's because you're excellent at one or two things. So same thing at Ipswich. If we had somebody come in who was a dribbler, we brought them in because they were an excellent dribbler. Then their passing might have been just okay. If we spend loads of time trying to develop their passing, they become okay at their passing, but their dribbling never really kicks on. And I think you could use this in any aspect of your life, not just football related, but in anything you do. So for me and as a club, what we need to do is not just improve the passing a little bit, but make their dribbling as good as possible. So I see that, as I said, myself as a coach, so if my strength is communication, let's not just work on the weaker areas, which might be, tactical knowledge. Let's also make that communication excellent and outstanding, because if someone's going to take you in any job, it's because you're excellent at something. Sorry, I've gone a little bit off your question there, but
no, it's brilliant. And I think you've touched on something that we regularly say to our students, and it's about being comfortable being uncomfortable. You've got to challenge yourself, haven't you, and address your strengths, your areas for development. Yeah. And it's really, really interesting to hear that that's formed such a part of your success in terms of your personal and professional development.
Yeah, definitely. And part of coming here was uncomfortable. I'd never been to the country before. I'd never been to the Caribbean before. But I think sometimes we have to, most times we have to push ourselves, as Lee said, out of that comfort zone, because if we don't, we just end up staying exactly where we are. So life is about taking risks and is about being uncomfortable, because that's where growth happens, as I said, as a player and as a coach and as a person. It's not to have the attention on you and speak in front of lots of people was never one of my strengths, and I still don't think it is, but I'm far more comfortable with it now than what I was a year ago, simply because I pushed myself and I forced myself to do it. And to be fair, on top of that, I ended up doing, so last year I did a presentation to Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president as well, which I never would have had that opportunity before. And I think if I hadn't have pushed myself prior to that to be better in front of people, I probably would have been very poor, or would maybe not have been asked to present in front of them. So because I pushed myself and because I was comfortable being uncomfortable, that's given me opportunities that way also.
That's amazing. That's a really great example. Thank you. So you've touched on there about, moving to the Caymans, and it was a struggle at first. You moved out there with your wife two a bit years ago. How was it settling in to Caribbean life for you?
Yeah, it was actually quite easy. It was so when we flew in, we arrived at like 10 o'clock at night, so it was pitch black, and I actually started working the next day. I think I was picked up about 10 o'clock. And because it was October, it's actually in like the rainy season. So I think for like the first week I was here, it rained heavily every day. And we had to cancel 3 or 4 sessions simply because the fields were waterlogged. And my wife was saying, because she was at home, she wasn't working at the time, and she was like, what have we moved into? Like, moved to the Caribbean, and it's rained every single day. But in terms of generally, it's been very easy. The people here are really nice, and it's as I said, it's an island of 64,000 people, so it's like half the population of Ipswich. So you see people all the time, and what I quite like is it's very multicultural. There's lots of different countries here, so lots of expats, as I said before, lots of Jamaican people, lots of English, Honduran, American, Canadian. So it is, it's a nice place to be. And I said the football. I think when you work in football, it's easy to make friends and to be a part of the community, because it's something easy to talk about. Everybody loves football. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a large portion of people love football, and you almost have that bond before you even know somebody. And you know, I can talk football for days. So find somebody else who's happy to talk football, and it becomes very, very easy.
Yeah, amazing. Students, any questions from you guys? Yeah, we've got a student. We've got a question from Adam. Adam, go ahead. What was the lowest point in your career, and how did you get yourself back on track?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So, in terms of that, it would be, so we played. We went into the Nations League and we played US Virgin Islands away, and we won 2-0, which was the country's first win in nearly 9 years. And we played really well. The journey was a bit of a nightmare. We were delayed, and we actually only arrived an hour before kickoff, and we had to move kickoff back an hour, which was not ideal at all for a Nations League game. But we ended up winning 2-0, and then we played Barbados 3 days later here. And we ended up beating them 3-2, which was a massive win for us. Nobody expected it. And so how it works is, obviously in the international, that was in September. We waited for a whole month for games then in October, and we went away to St. Martin, who had lost heavily in their first 2 games. And our players almost thought that we were, all of a sudden, we were the best team in the world. We'd won 2 games and we were unstoppable, and we ended up losing 3-0. And we were well and truly beat. We were really poor. We forgot the principles that our game was built on. So it was built. We knew we had to outwork the opposition every game, and we didn't do it in that. Tactically we were okay, but it was on a horrible pitch, and it was very, very warm, and we were struggled. So that was probably the toughest moment for me in terms of, okay, how do I now deal with this? How do I get? So we played them again 3 days later here, the exact same team. And how do I now get their heads off the floor? How do I motivate them? How do I get them back to the reality of, okay, this is football? And actually what I tried to do with that, so that was the lowest moment, but I actually said it was probably the most important moment for the team as well, because I think, you know, like anything, when you're winning games, it's easy. Football's easy when you win games. You know, even if you don't play particularly well, the result kind of glosses over the problems that you may have had. So that was very tough. And, you know, those next few days of training, of conversations, of, you know, and maximizing that time of, okay, it's lunchtime, we're with the group. How can I get, whether it be the mood up, how can I get some of the principles back in? So maximizing all that time, and we ended up winning the next game 1-0 here. So that's against the same team. So that was probably the toughest moment, but looking back, it was probably the most important moment as well. And probably in terms of skill of the coach, how I could adapt and how I could get my principles across. And thankfully, I seem to have done that. And as I said, we won that game 1-0. And then in the November, we had 2 more games. We beat US Virgin Islands, and then we lost to Barbados away. But Barbados are a great side, and you know, they ended up winning the group. But that's probably the toughest moment, and certainly a moment that I learned the most in. So again, about being uncomfortable. That's, as I said, I think that's where you get the most growth. So those bad moments, I think, you know, not that you look forward to them, but I think you can make the most of those situations, whether that be a bad moment, maybe a bad assignment, same thing. I've got a bad grade in my assignment. Okay, what can I learn from that? What can I take to make sure that doesn't happen again? Was it myself? Did we not prepare properly? Was it because of whatever reason? But I need to work that out, and I need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great question. And I think there's a theme that runs through, isn't there, in terms of your success and the success of lots of people within a pro environment, that resilience plus courage plus determination equals growth, equals success.
Absolutely.
And embracing the challenge that comes with some of those failures, because failure is often the thing that ignites that growth, isn't it?
Yeah, I use the word grit a lot, so about being gritty. So exactly the same as what you just said. And I think it's no different with players or coaches or in any environment you do it. It's not always necessarily the best ones that go through. Sometimes it is the most hardworking, it's the most resilient. It's those players or those people that don't give up. Am I the best coach? Certainly not. I'm okay at what I do, but what I do know is I'll work as hard as possible and I'll put the most hours in, and I will do everything it takes to be successful. And as I said, I think if you can do that, that gives you an advantage against a lot of people, even those who are perceived better or stronger in some areas. I think there's lots of examples of it. And if you look at players like Aguero, you have players like Suarez, who, yes, they're unbelievably talented, but in terms of that hard work and that grit and the resilience they've had to have throughout the years, and especially their younger years in the environments they've grown up in, I think that's the reason that they're the players they are today. So I think if you're really willing to work hard, I think certainly it gives yourself every chance to be successful in whatever you do.
Amazing. So we looked at your perhaps the most challenging moment. What about your best moment?
Yeah, I think there's a few, and I think on a personal level, so the obvious one would be that Barbados game in terms of let's actually the USVI game, when we win our first game in the country's first game in 9 years. I think that was an amazing moment, and then to follow that up 3 days later with a 3-2 win against Barbados, of course, again another amazing moment there. But for me as well, I've had a few players that are, and because I coached 16s at Ipswich, that are now on the fringes or in and around the first team at Ipswich. And again, in terms of proud moments, that's a proud moment for me. I certainly don't think they're in the first team because of me. Absolutely not. But if I've helped them a little bit on their journey, or given them a little bit of information, or facilitated a training session that they can improve and grow in, that for me is a nice moment as well. And I still have, I always drop them a message when they're on the bench or they make their debut for Ipswich. So those moments are great for me as well. And I think that, like I said, if I can help somebody on their journey to being successful, that's as part of my my role as a developer of players and people, that's great success for me.
So don't be shy. Let's name drop. Who are a couple of those players that you've seen through?
Yeah, so and I think it will be more further on, because they're still the younger ones. So people like Elkan Baggott, who's obviously on the fringes at the moment, Liam Gibbs, Tawanda Chirewa. So the younger players that are kind of 16, 17, 18 now that are borderline can make in their debut. And Liam Gibbs has played a few times, and then I had a little bit to do with like Armando and a few others, but I didn't coach them per se. I've coached some sessions with them in. People like Jack Lancaster, and so there's some, but I think there'll be certainly more in a few years' time, because there's some really good young players there. And I know the club isn't maybe where it wants to be, but I think the good thing about being lower down the divisions is young players get more opportunities. So I think there's a few. I think Liam Gibbs is a very, very good player, and I think he's got a very big future ahead of him. And a couple of younger ones, people like Jack Manley as well, I think he's an under 16 now, but and Nico Valentine, who are great players. So I think there's over the next 5 years, I think we'll see a lot of good young players come out of Ipswich that will do really well.
Amazing. Great. Thanks for that. We'll look out for those names. So we've got a really good question here from one of our students, and he's asked, being a national coach, you don't work as closely or for as long with players as you would as a coach for a team who play in the league. So how difficult is it to prepare and train players who you may find limited amount of time with?
Yeah, it certainly has its challenges, and I think we're in a quite unique situation that we still do train regularly. So because most of our players are island-based, we train on a Monday and a Wednesday with national team, or at least a Wednesday. Sometimes Monday we can't, but we'll always train on a Wednesday. And some weeks, so like over Christmas, there was no club games. So we did almost like a 3-week camp where we trained regularly. We've still got a couple of players in the US. We've got one in Portugal. We've got a few players in England that, yes, we don't see so regularly. And I think when they do come back, we have to maximise that time. So in the build up to games, if we get a player 5-6 days before, I have to make sure that Everything that I've worked on with the other group, I have to try and give them that information or those ideas within those 5 days. And what I try and do now is include them now. So if there's a session we work on that there's some important principles, or let's say there's some counter-attacking stuff we've done, I'll also try and send videos of what we've worked on. Not necessarily the videos of our session, because we don't have the resources to film everything, but it might be a couple of videos of Liverpool, some good counter-attacking goals that I'll also forward on, so they've already got those ideas of how we want to play going into those games. But it is certainly a challenge, and I try and keep as regular contact with those players as possible, so how they're doing with their clubs. Obviously, most aren't playing at the moment. I try and speak to their coaches when I can as well. So I try and include. I think the answer to that question would be I try and include them as much as I can when they're not here, and then try and maximise that time when they are, so they're fully bought into the process.
Yeah,
really good question.
Yeah, really great question. Thank you, Jordan, for that question. We've got another one about the sacrifices and stuff like that. So, what sacrifices have you had to make to be successful?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it as well. Obviously, as I said, when I was at college, I was working 3 jobs, and at university, and 3 jobs, and working as an intern at Ipswich. And I think, again, I actually watched a video of Kevin Prince Boateng yesterday saying the same thing as a player, and he was like, when he was younger, his friends wanted him to go play on the PlayStation or to go and do this, and it's very easy to say yes and to fall into those ways. But instead, he said, well, instead I'd go and run, because I knew I had to run. I knew I had to do what I had to do to be successful. And I think it's no different in, again, any aspect of life, and certainly of my coaching. I had to be always available. So in the early years, when I was an intern at Ipswich and I was volunteering with the 7s and 8s, quite often any of the academy coaches would not be available for training or games. So I made sure I was available for everything. So, and I'm lucky that my wife is very reasonable, and she knows that this is how it is. For example, me and my wife might have had dinner booked to go on a Wednesday night to, I don't know, Nando's or wherever. And all of a sudden, an hour before, I get a text saying, can anybody coach tonight? And I would always say yes. So even if I had plans made, I would always cancel my plans to go and coach, again, because I knew I had to do that bit extra to be noticed. Because, as I said, if I didn't, somebody else would. And then the next time, rather than ask me, they probably asked that person. And then all of a sudden, 2 years down the line, I'm still in the exact same position, because not that I'm not reliable, but because I guess that word we said before about being adaptable, because I'm not adaptable and I'm not available, an opportunity goes to somebody else. So I had to, as I said, I had to make sure I was always available, and I had to make sure I changed my plans, and I sacrificed a lot in terms of, I guess, in terms of family life, and it's paid off. We have a nice lifestyle here now. I'm still working 7 days a week constantly, mornings, afternoons, evenings, but I'm in a job that I love doing. So I think if you find something that you truly love, it doesn't really feel like work. And I think if you have good people around you who recognize that you have to make sacrifices sometimes, and those people are hard to find, by the way, but I think I think that again gives you another platform for success. So you certainly have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice maybe on a Friday night. Did I want to drive to Cambridge and do a development centre? Absolutely not. I wanted to coach, but driving for 2.5 hours, there and back, or an hour and a half back is not what I wanted to do. But I knew that further down the line it would pay off. So sacrifice is another part of your journey, of all of our journeys. If you're not willing to sacrifice, I think you're not going to really progress in whatever industry you decide to go into.
Brilliant. And do you miss being able to play yourself?
Yeah, I do. I probably stopped playing too early, and I even look at the leagues here now and I think, do you know what, I could do a job. I think I actually joined in a little bit in a session on Monday, and my standard was quite good, which surprised a few. So I do miss playing, and I think that's probably not a regret, but that's something I wish I'd have done more, is play alongside coaching more. But if I had have done that, then potentially I wouldn't be in the role I'm in, because I would have maybe had to miss opportunities to play. So it's it's a difficult one. Like I said, I miss playing, but do I regret not playing? Probably not, because as a result, it's given me more time and opportunity to coach them and develop those skills or develop those opportunities that I might not have had otherwise.
Yeah, you've got a great question here. Do you still get involved in the rondo?
Sometimes. I try not to knock the confidence of my players too much, so I have to sometimes. No, sometimes I do. Like I said, we on Monday. So because a lot of the games here are on a Sunday. Monday is like a recovery session, so we split into 3 groups, and so I took the defenders, and we just did some basic defending stuff, some dealing with crosses. So we had 2 wide players on the right, 2 on the left, and 2 centre halves against 2 strikers. The right back and the right winger would combine, get across him, and it was about obviously defending crosses, but not defending centrally. So I was central, and if a ball came out, I would hit it, and one's come out and I've hit it on the half volley, and everyone's seen it, and it's gone straight in the top corner. And so in those moments, I think maybe I should do a little bit more, but I don't know, I'm a little bit too, I don't know if I'm too old, but I'm certainly too heavy to play more regularly now.
With your vision and passing ability, mate, you can just do the Jan Mulvey role, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, someone the shout of Flavio Alonso was going around. Yes, but it's good. No, I do. I think it's important you join in now and again, because I think it improves the like anything. It's about it's not necessarily about tempo, but it's about just that atmosphere, building that atmosphere, and I think the players like it sometimes. When the coach joins in, or if you can, especially with younger players, so not so much now, but when I was at Ipswich, sometimes you had to join in to set the standards a little bit. So when you're working with younger players, can you try and show them what you want more? Can you increase the intensity or the tempo of the practice? So I think with younger players, certainly it's important you do join in now and again as well. Just make sure if you're in a rondo, you don't get nutmegged by any player. So that's the danger of putting yourself in a rondo, definitely.
Yeah, too right. But you know, when you're coaching, you always set the rules of the rondo, don't you?
True.
Yeah.
Always, yeah.
Yeah. Is it with Beyonce rules? You only go in if you're to the left.
The left, yeah. Still do that one. Genuinely, still do that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beyonce.
We've had some great questions flooding in. Adam has asked, when coaching, how do you deal with big egos and make them perform for a team instead of for themselves?
Yeah, so I think that's certainly a challenge, and I think, of course, the higher up you go, the more difficult that becomes. And I think, as I said, going to my previous point, if you build really good relationship with people, and we've got a few players that are very, very strong, and if you build good relationships with them and you find out what they want, so we've got a couple of players who want to go overseas and play at a higher level, and so everything they do, I link back to that. So if they're arrogant, if they don't feel they have to work hard enough, I always link it back to that. So I'm like, hang on a minute, you're telling me you want to go and play overseas with that attitude, with that lack of work rate, with that whatever it be, that won't happen. And I think that's to constantly link that to their individual goals, I think is very, very important. So I haven't had it too much in terms of players not buying into the system, because again, my principles are, with where we're at, we can't afford to have players that take liberties and are not willing to work hard. We're not Canada, who can play with 10 players and one player who doesn't defend or who does their own thing. We can't do that, because the chances are we won't have the ball as much as these teams, and we need 11 players who are warriors and willing to fight and tackle and get hit and get hurt. So I link that always back. If you're going to play in this team, you have to do these things. If you don't do these things, it doesn't matter who you are or how good you are. It's impossible for you to play, because I have to trust you. So that's a couple of ways that I do that, is that constant team message. This is what you have to do to play in this team. And then individually, this is your goals. Well, if you're going to get here, you have to do these things.
So it's about really personalising that feedback. And again, you touched on it earlier about being honest with players.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, the better relationships you build, the more honest you can be. And you know, like I said, everyone likes to be told how good they are, but in reality, how far is that going to get you when they go somewhere else? And actually, you're not then the best player, or you're not then maybe the things you thought you were good at and not as good as somebody else. How do you deal with that? So yeah, you have to be honest with people. And it's difficult sometimes for players to see, because The standard of football here isn't what it is in other bigger countries. So I try to use that experience of, okay, this is what it looks like. And they know when they play international football, the intensity and the level is very, very different. So it's that honesty with players is incredibly important.
Brilliant. And we've had a question from another one of our students, from Hayden. What aspects of football do you get most excited about in the Cayman Islands?
That's a really good question, actually. I think the project here is really exciting. So I think that if you look at we have some really good young players, and in terms of national team, our goal is to qualify for a Gold Cup, which is effectively like the Europe's version of the Euros. It'd be very, very difficult for us to do, but it's not completely impossible. And so how that would work is, in the Nations League, if you win your group, which we missed out on goal difference last time, you then play in 2 qualifying games. And if you win both of those, you qualify for the Gold Cup. If we had won our group, we'd have played Guyana and then Haiti. So it would have been very, very difficult. Haiti are obviously a very, very good side, but that excites me. And there's quite a few. There's lots of exciting things here as well, in terms of, I see getting young players educational opportunities through football as an exciting part of my job as well. So if I can get a U15 or 17 an opportunity in the US to go to university, to get a scholarship, so they get their education as well as playing football, for me that's success also. And then further to that, there was no coaching courses here when I got here. I hadn't had a coaching course in about 5 years, and again, so the island, or the coaches here, are starved of that experience and opportunity and the qualifications. So trying to do loads on that, on coach education. And as I said, we did 3 CONCACAF D licenses last year. We're hoping to do a C and a D again this year. And trying to build relationships with other associations where we can send our coaches when things open up, so they can go get a UEFA B license, or they can get a UEFA A license. So there's lots of exciting stuff here. In terms of what's the most exciting, I'm not too sure, but in terms of what I enjoy most, it's certainly coaching international games. And that, I love player development, so seeing players grow, but ultimately I also like that pressure of, okay, we're going to win games, and how I set the team up tactically, and how we prepare mentally. That side of the game that I never really had working at Ipswich, working with youth development, is something that I really, really enjoy. And it's kind of given me more, I want loads more of that, because that's the one downfall of international football, is we don't play enough games. Even prior to COVID, you play maybe, I think I've coached in 2.5 years, 7 games, or 8 games, sorry. The 6 that I spoke about, and then we had 2 friendlies against Cuba, where we lost 1-0 and we drew 1-0, which are great. I love those, but probably I want more of it. So I think further down the line, for me, what I'd like to do is get involved in a club somewhere at a professional level, that we have games every week, because that side of it, I absolutely love that pressure and that, that excitement of match day. There's nothing like it as a player, as a coach, as a, whatever your role is in football. That's what we live for.
We've got some students on this call who are going out to the States for US sports scholarships this year. So if they're in some of the southern states, then it might be that they can fly over and have a kickabout with you, or even get their college to have some games, perhaps. Who knows? Great opportunities.
Yeah, certainly. We've had that before. We've had a couple of colleges come here, and we were going to go before this again. We were looking to go to the US to play a few games there against a couple of college teams and a couple of USL teams. So no, definitely that's something that we want to do more of. Unfortunately, it's just the current pandemic is causing all sorts of problems for obvious reasons.
Yeah. We've got a question from Bradley, another student. How did you adapt to the change in football ability and style?
Yeah, so it's very different. I've gone from even working with some of these 16-year-olds who at Ipswich, who are, have unbelievable ability and on the ball, to working with, some senior team players that don't have that. But at the same time, I think, as I said, being adaptable is really important. So how I adapted, I guess coming here, I had no real expectations, and I think I was very open-minded in terms of, I knew the standard would be different. I knew that maybe player mindsets would be slightly different. And I guess because I had no real expectations, it was quite easy to adapt. It's still something that, as I said, like the timekeeping that frustrates me, but probably not as much as it would have done if I'd have come here expecting everything to be the highest standard. I recognise that here football is still developing, and what I'm trying to do is build the principles not only for the senior team, but also the younger team, that in 10, 15, 20 years, some of those principles will still be in place. And we talk about leaving a legacy. Hopefully I will have left something here that will benefit football across the island for many, many years. So I think it has its challenges when you work with players that are maybe not as good technically, or their understanding isn't as good. But I've been one that kind of embraces challenge always. As I said, going up against maybe ex-professionals at Ipswich who wanted full-time roles or even part-time roles was something that, you know, I had to be adaptable, and I had to you know, embrace that challenge. And I think that's something that I'm always going to get if I go for a job somewhere else. The chances are they'll be highly qualified and people with you know, a lot of experience, whether that be as a player or as a coach. So what, you know, going slightly outside what you're saying, but what can I give that maybe one of those can't? You know, their experiences they've had are very different to mine. It doesn't mean they're better than mine. It just means that maybe, you know, some of the things I've learned that they won't have had to, you know, sorry, I'm getting not explaining this very well, but I can never have the experience of playing in front of 50,000 people in terms of playing a Premier League game, a Championship game, a League One game, or whatever it be. But I have a better understanding potentially of individual development, or I have a better understanding of developing communication skills in terms of as a group. So in terms of adaptability, I've learned those skills that others won't have, that I can then use in a different way to what potentially some of those other coaches that have played at a high level have.
Yeah, so it's really about focusing on, like you said right at the start, about your areas for development and your strengths, and making your excellent strengths even better.
Yeah, and I think the IDP helps with that. So for my individual development plan and updating that regularly, I think that helps, and that's something. So yeah, as well, I can, if I go for a job interview, I can show them my individual development plan and what I've worked on and how I've worked on it, which potentially some other coaches can't do. Yeah.
So you've talked about some of the other coaches, the guys and people you've worked with who've been in the professional game. I know, for example, some of those that you're still quite close with personally, and what have you learned from them?
Yeah, so I'm really good friends with Titus Bambaloo. I think you had on recently, right?
We've got him coming up soon. Yeah.
Really good friends with Titus, and I speak to him regularly, and not only him. There's a few others. Chris Hogg, who's the U23 coach at Newcastle now, but was Hibernian captain for years. I speak to Kieran now and again, Kieran Dyer as well. So some really good people that have unbelievable playing experience. And certainly from Titus, what I've picked up is those little bits of detail that they don't teach you on coaching courses. So that little bit of tactical stuff as a centre half, if the ball's come in to a striker, he speaks about so if you're a striker, as the ball comes to you, and he said Alan Shearer was really good at this, as he went to receive the ball, a defender would usually hit him. So as he controls it on his chest, you'd almost lose the ball because you're under pressure. What he's saying is that they teach them how to take the hit. So as the ball travels, he would back in earlier, almost take that physical contact a second or so before he receives the ball. So he's already got that base and he can control it and play. And they're little things that you don't, little bits of information like that they don't teach you on coaching courses, but because he's played 300 games in the Premier League, he can give me those ideas and that experience. So loads of that stuff. Like I said, I never played at a high level, so those experiences of what the changing room was like, of what dealing with failure and difficult opportunities, those experiences they had, and like I said, I'm very fortunate that Titus is very open and is a really good guy. I try and use them to my advantage. So going back to the previous question about dealing with difference in quality, speaking with him on how, because it's no different for an ex-pro who playing for Newcastle in the Champions League and then goes to coaching Ipswich under 16s is very, very different in terms of quality. But those transferable skills make it easy to work with any age group and any ability. And I think the more you can speak to people that have experienced all different levels, so speaking to somebody who coaches grassroots under 8s and their challenges and how they deal with it, there might be something in that helps me deal with working with national team players or communicating with anybody. So I think you can learn from everybody, whether they're ex-pros, whether they're and not just in football as well. So I also believe you can learn from other industries as well. So and I know there was a guy at Ipswich who was big on this as well. He would talk to us, like he would speak to the police about how they deal with tough situations. Because again, if you can learn how they de-escalate situations on a mass scale, there's something in that maybe you can use in your coaching to deal with a bust up in training, or it might be a communication. How do the police communicate? I think a pilot, so he spoke to like Air Force pilots, how do they communicate? Like the red arrows, how do they communicate under those pressures? If you can learn something from that and you can transfer it into your industry of how I talk to players, I think that's, again, has a lot of benefits also.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. So we're at the tail end of this, what's been an incredible, really insightful interview. So let's talk football to finish off with. Let's get some name drops in there. So we've got some questions to come from John Nice first, who is the Suffolk New College press officer. So John, over to you.
Hello, can you hear
John?
me?
Yeah, we've got you.
Cool. Yeah, it's just a couple of quick fire ones. Like over here, everyone thinks they can be the England manager or Ipswich manager, whatever. Do you get that when you're out and about? Do people always tell you how to do your job?
Oh yeah, of course. And I think you'll get that everywhere. Everyone, because everyone loves football, everyone thinks they're a football expert, right? So it's we'll have all seen it. You go to Ipswich and everyone's got an opinion and telling the manager how they should do things. So yeah, that's something that I think you always have to deal with, and that's in any industry to some degree. But I always make when I'm talking to people, you wouldn't go to a party and you see a doctor and a doctor says something. You wouldn't tell a doctor how to do his job. Well, I think you should do it this way. Yet with football, everybody seems to think they know the answer and they should tell you how to do it. So it's I had some funny conversations with people, but one or two I think you can take some really good stuff from. But yeah, that's something that you certainly get everywhere, I think.
And in terms of your coaching ambitions, what's the dream?
Yeah, I think the dream is big. I'd like to be a Premier League manager one day. Whether that's possible or whether that's achievable, I'm not sure. But I'll certainly do everything I can to get myself in a position where I can coach at the highest possible level. And if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, would I be coaching an international team? I'd have said absolutely not. So I think as long as you work hard, and yes, there's a certain element of luck, but I think if you take opportunities and you work hard, then I think that's not an impossible dream.
And just finally, more of a sort of a personal one, but I can't imagine there's much. I'm sat here with a blanket on my knees because it's absolutely freezing here. But what do you miss most about Suffolk?
Yeah, you miss a few things. So obviously, all my family is obviously in Suffolk, which is we're fortunate we live in an era where you can speak face to face with people even though they're on the other side of the world. But Suffolk's a beautiful place. I still miss the countryside as of such, and it's not much consolation for you. But I actually miss the cold weather a little bit. Like I know that might sound stupid, but when you're in 30 degrees heat for 2.5 years, it's I look forward to those cooler days where it's a little bit overcast. So I actually do miss the weather a little bit. Maybe not the freezing cold weather that you're in at the moment, but certainly the bit of colder weather. And I miss the football as well. The standard of football. I was quite lucky that I'd go and watch as many games. I'd go and watch Ipswich every time they're at home, and through friends I'd go up to Premier League games regularly as well. So I miss the standard of football, and even the local standard of football as well. We'd go to Braintree or we'd go to Ipswich Wanderers as much as possible and watch games. So miss that definitely, as well as people.
Cool, that's brilliant. I'll hand back to Lee then with the name drops.
Yeah. Thanks, John. So yeah, just to finish off with Ben, for us as football fans, for maybe particularly some Ipswich fans out there, who are the best players you've worked with and around?
Yeah, so and not even just with, I think against as well, and obviously that Canada game, if it goes ahead, there'll be a number of players on that field who are obviously an outstanding standard. And we played Barbados, and they had Jamal Blackman, who I think it's Jamal Blackman, who played a long time in the Championship with a number of clubs, Reading and a few other clubs. And as going into players I've coached, I said those Ipswich boys who I think will be in and around the first team for many years to come. I think they're probably the better players I've worked with. I think there's a few players here that could have an opportunity to play overseas, and I'm not sure they're playing the equivalent of League One or the Championship. But I think ask me that question maybe in 5 years or 3 years, and maybe hopefully you'll know a few more of those players. But as well, even coaches as well. I think I coached against Willie Donachie, who was assistant coach when we played Montserrat, and he's obviously Newcastle assistant first coach for a long time. And for me, that's I don't just look at players; I look at coaches as well. And I'm fortunate, as I said, that I've spoken to Roberto Martinez, and I'm speaking with the Canada coach John Herdman as well, who he's from England, he's from up north, and for me, that's building these relationships is great for me, and the things I can pick up from them is great. I look at it from a coaching point of view more so than a player's point of view now. I think it's and that's why if these games don't go ahead, I'm not necessarily disappointed for myself. I'm disappointed for the players, because to have an opportunity to play in these games against people like Alphonso Davies, I think is an opportunity they may not get again. So hopefully it goes ahead. As I said, I'm a firm believer that I will coach at a higher level, and I will have those opportunities. So, as I said, if you ask me in a few more years, I think I might be able to give you a few more names, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, other than Blackman, can you think of anybody perhaps that you've watched or coached against that maybe has really kicked on from youth level into a first team somewhere, or anything like that you've just been amazed by as well?
Yeah, not so much coach, because I used to watch obviously a lot of training. So like Flynn Downs is an example of not someone he wasn't in my age group. I was coaching at Ipswich part time, but I'd watched their group a lot and occasionally coached. But Flynn was one who wasn't the best player in his age group at Ipswich. He still had ability, but he wasn't one of what you call your A-grade players. But linking back to what we said about the grittiness and the persistence, he was always the hardest worker, and I think as a result of that, that's why he's now playing at the level that consistently playing for Ipswich first team, and obviously was linked with Premier League clubs and represented England at various levels. So I'd say in terms of surprise, he was one that surprised a lot of people at Ipswich, and I think that he's testament to his own hard work and grit and persistence. As you said, I think if you add that to your own personality, then I think whatever industry you'll go into, you give yourselves half a chance.
Brilliant, thank you. So just to finish off with, and this is kind of like a two-part question, do you think there are a lot of opportunities for students at Suffolk New College, for example, our sports students on this call, to get into coaching and into pro sport? And what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think there definitely are, if you're willing to, as I said, if you're willing to volunteer and you're willing to do more than everybody else. Because I think ultimately, if you ask anybody coaching grassroots, if they could coach full time, they'd say yes. But the question would be, are they willing to do extra? Are they willing to do more than everybody else? So I believe that I got a coaching opportunity at Ipswich simply because I was willing to volunteer as a sports science intern. If I hadn't have done that, then I'd potentially, maybe I'd be coaching somewhere, but probably not here. So I think there'll always be opportunities. I think you'll always have your challenges against other coaches, ex-professionals. But if you apply yourselves properly, and if you are willing to work hard and you know, develop yourself as a coach and listen and learn from everybody around you, then I certainly think there's no reason you can't be successful and work full time in football at whatever level you want to or you desire. But as I said, if you're not, sometimes I think we see opportunities and we think they're below us, and we go, like with the sports science, did I want to go and be a sports science intern? Not really. Did I want to go in free when I could have sat at home or gone and played football? No. But as a result of that, that's what got me my foot in the door. And I think then you have to have that. You have to find a way to get your foot in the door. That might be volunteering. You might be you phoning Ipswich when things go down and saying, can I come and watch some sessions? Can I be involved in coaching in the community program? And then the more time you're there, you get recognised for being good. Quite often when we were looking for part-time coaches, when I was in a full-time role, we'd say, okay, well, which coaches have we got in the community program that are doing well, that are committed, that we can, you know, potentially look to use. So I think that's important, that you take every opportunity and you maximise every opportunity, and you're just willing to sacrifice and be available. I think that, like I said, that's how I did it, and it worked for me, and it worked very well for me. So I believe that's a good option, because I think that if I hadn't have done that, somebody else would have done it, and I certainly wouldn't be here right now.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that. And Ben, I'd just like to say on behalf of Suffolk New College and SNC Pro Talk, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. It's been really, really insightful and inspiring. And hopefully the students will have taken just as much from this as I have, and certainly jealous of the view outside your window.
It's brightened up a little bit now as well. So I'd like to say I could get to the beach and enjoy it, but I'll be on calls and then coaching all day. But
yeah,
anyway.
And you've got a very important meeting coming up in a few minutes as well, haven't you? Yeah,
in 12 minutes. Find out more about these games if they're going to go ahead. But if not, we'll adapt and we'll move on to the next ones. And if they are, then great. So no, it's been great. It's been really good. And if anybody's got any more questions or wants to reach out to me, then more than happy to talk more or help you in any way that I can.
Brilliant. Ben, great to see you. Thanks ever so much. Take care and good luck.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's nice. All right, guys. Take care, guys.